Okay, so our final speaker in the morning is Dickson from Faulkner Architects. Again, a different perspective on library design. And I'll leave it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's before lunch. And an apology to Anne, because actually I worked on a project that was dark and dingy back in the 90s. I was a young man at the time. But I think that fundamentally shows how we've begun to understand more about people, how people react in space, how they commune, how they learn. And that's something I want to kind of touch on. We get involved with lots of different library design, both public and academic. And I'm going to take you through a few things, but these are some of the things that we spend 90% of our time indoors. Whether we like it or not, whether we're sleeping, working, in a car, we're in an object. And fundamentally that begs the question is, we need to make that healthy, and we need to make it appropriate. And the other thing that is quite interesting is this is specifically aimed towards public sector libraries. And we hear this all the time. The greatest risk to public sector is IT and mobile technology. People kind of perceive that because they've got Google, therefore we don't need libraries. I mean, I find that particularly depressing. In academic libraries, it's probably one of the greatest enablers that have happened over the last few years. So there's quite different kind of proposition to this space. So in public, when we were evaluating a project called The Word, we've seen some images. We wanted to kind of ask ourselves this question: is how do we kind of make it relevant to modern society, and how do we kind of reconnect the typology back into our urban landscapes? And we fundamentally wanted to kind of come and ask us about a place where life in the city unfolds. So it's a social, cultural, educational destination within an urban landscape for us. And as a consequence, if you think it like that, then it can host a varied amount of content. And that content has to be arranged in different spatial orders, but it also has to be able to kind of deliver different programs, whether that's somebody simply reading or that's somebody harnessing their kind of creativity. I'll quickly flash through this. This was quite a brave step from South Tyneside Council. They had two leisure and cultural destinations. One was the foreshore onto the mouth of the Tyne, and the other one was a theatre on the edge of the river. And they want to connect this with a dying typography called a library, and drive a new footfall through the high street. So the library sits kind of at the end of the main high street, and from that the plan was to deliver commercial opportunities, whether that's a reinvention of the high street through retail, whether that's a performance space, whether that's a cinema. So it's quite a big step, and this is what it looks like. So it's round, and I read a book saying, if you design a library, you should never design a round library. Work, that's me, shot dead straight away. But for me, it's about how it sits in the landscape, how it invites you in. I think it's really important that you are a showcase. You need to show yourself as a showcase. You need to give people clarity of the offer from outside. Because it's from that outside that people start to engage with the activities within. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is a simple diagram, and I still think this holds true for academic libraries as it does hold true for public libraries, is this notion of, for me, connectivity and democracy. Even the landscape of education, you're probably the most democratic space that exists. What we need to do is kind of promote this idea that someone wants to do some natural searches. In this instance, we use the circle because it is a purely democratic form that allows us, both inside and outside, to kind of walk around it and through it. Ignore this. This is just how we dealt with big glass openings, one to the town, one to the river. But more important for us was to start this notion of bringing the community together into a central flexible space and arrangement. That would allow you on a stacked diagram to start to see visibly what the offer was. And then within that is to then place a series of landscapes. And I've heard lots about kind of what landscapes should be. But for me, we are all as part of the design team, because you are as much part of it as we are, responsible to understand flexibility, adaptability, what that means. Where cellular space is required rather than open landscape, because both are very valid. So where we've got large cellular space, it's because that you either have to have something that's very concentrated, something that is very confidential, something which is very specific in terms of the environment you create. And the open landscape are the bits that you populate. I've seen lots of examples with today's trends in acoustically controlled systems. All of those are all really, really valid. But I think it's kind of clear from a sectional perspective, for me, visibility, understand how people might move around that building, the chance encounter, that point where you actually meet people you've never met and you start to have dialogue, you start to understand their perspectives, what their educational programs might be, and then how you might then grade that space. And in this instance, we put the kind of most acoustically controlled, sensitive space towards the edge and allow people in the middle to circulate around. It's a diagram, it's not the only answer, but I think the grading of acoustic sensibility is really interesting and suitable to the way that people want to learn and have kind of concentrated individual thought. We, in this instance, mediated that with traditional staff, knowing that the traditional staff would become less and less and less and less. Then we placed cellular in the diagram. So that was a basic kind of diagram, and then we got asked this question, which I thought was quite interesting because we didn't have this. Politically, there was quite a quick-moving process. The brief was quite traditional in some aspects. So the chief exec asked us this: why would my daughter or father keep coming back? And I think this is when we start to really interrogate what was going on in library design. So we wanted to understand the missing demographics, missing teenagers in public libraries. We wanted to understand, therefore, the behaviours, provide appropriate tools and environments, get a sense of place by creating belonging. So if we give, and to do that, we said fundamentally, the individual, when they come into that building, has to think of them as the content creator, not just the content user. It's a different mentality. So they come and they can harvest their own capabilities. They're supported by the fantastic library team that's there. That then set up a kind of landscape of, of course, that's about human-centric strategy. We start to understand each user group, how they move through that building and the tools they might have. Interestingly, I think Northampton did an interesting conversation here, because I think this is essentially what Northampton is structured like. And this diagram comes from workplace theory. Workplace is probably more advanced in terms of library design than in terms of in delivering library design. So it's the understanding of the relationship between a behavioural environment, how you work, how you study, how you play, with being supported by the physical environment, so the facilities that you're arranging, and how the virtual environment can mobilise that whole system. And I think this is quite interesting in the sense that all of a sudden you'll start with unowned facilities, shared but managed, open landscape which is shared and managed. In workplace it's about sweating the cash, making sure people stay, making sure they're healthy. And I think in library design it's a different sense. I think the other aspect of our study was when we were looking at public libraries again. In this diagram, typically libraries were self-contained, they were of themselves, they were their own building with their own internal arrangements. But we want to see, well, why can't they be connected both by virtual connections or by a space that allows facsimiles within the building to be a much broader network. And again, I think this diagram is as appropriate for academic libraries. I mean, what is an academic library now? And this allows really, when you think about a house of physical and virtual connection. So, for example, in the Word, at night, I can connect to dark sky in Keeler. I can project what's on the telescope in Keeler into some of the workrooms. So I'm kind of connecting a story there. I'm connecting a set of events. And I can do that with social providers, educational providers. The challenge there is making sure we've got enough network connection and fibre connection coming into the building. So, in a sense, this was public library diagram, archives collection, LPC, traditionally cafe lounge. Then we saw this move towards connection with probably history centres, customer services. And I think that really was to drive in footfall into a public library rather than actually change the face of a public library. It's to kind of exist the fact that get more people through. But I think from there we've seen much more use of creating added value space. So in the Word we have maker spaces which have connections back to Sunderland University, so digital labs. So we start with kids 4 years old learning how to code, learning how to 3D print. As they go and become more skilled and entrepreneurial, they can get access to a full fab lab into Sunderland University. And it's the same with business lounges, that's flexible hosted space. We end up with audio-visual studios. So we start off and we create brand new content space within academic libraries. So what is a public library? Where's the boundary now? We've got synergistic partnering, gateways into social provision. We've got creative new entrepreneurial landscapes in there. We've got public-private relationships that are possible within there. Interestingly, if you apply it to academic libraries, again, where is the boundary of an academic library anymore? I can see the biggest growth in workplace is co-worker space, especially supported co-worker space. So what we want to do as a country is keep hold of the skills, and the skills are coming out of the universities, but then they're dissipating off. If we provide supported space where universities are providing finance advice, HR advice, all of those other skills that young people need to kind of be creative, then why can't that connect into as part of a kind of library diagram? I don't see a problem, it's just a threshold, it's just a boundary. Let's be aspirational. So what else do we do? We I guess you guys have to understand things like academic behaviours. You'll see semester 1, everybody arrives, chilled out, let's have a drink, let's do lots of sleeping, bits of going to lectures, and then it ramps up, and it becomes more serious, less sleeping, more individual study, more closed group study. So the question there then is, how adaptive does my library need to be to support this change in behaviour? That's only one profile of behaviour. So behaviour is making sure that we would provide you guys with a supportive environment that's IT rich, connected, allows adaptability. Cellular space can actually be completely enclosed, partially enclosed. Rooms can open up and have different functions. The diagrams on the right is kind of questioning, I guess this is back to, where's the boundary of the library? Is this not part of the delivery of teaching, or is it part of the delivery of teaching? That's what we've seen in terms of Northampton. So I think the landscape, it's a really exciting time for libraries. But I think it's really how we kind of support that in a kind of healthy way. Which comes on to my kind of human-centric stuff again. We are starting to use different standards for creating places for humans to exist, creating healthy environments. Historically, 10, 15 years ago, we had accreditation systems like BREEAM and LEED. You may have heard of them, but we get badged up. You know, you're a BREEAM excellent building, which really means it's got an environmental quality to it, but it's all based on carbon. It's the amount of carbon we use. And how relevant is carbon? I mean, I probably could give Anne that rubbish building again and make it BREEAM outstanding with the fact that I'm not putting windows in it, because I'm minimising my carbon. So for us, we're starting to say, well, you know, WELL standards developed in the US are a really fantastic way of starting to approach design in a completely new way, considering the human-centric design. And it's all based about wellness. It's all focused towards different body systems to ensure that we can give everybody the opportunity to be healthy within the built environment. And you'll see, you know, it's again, the behaviour informs the design informs the operation. It's a cyclical thing, and it's constantly evaluated. There is a hierarchical tree to this, so air quality being the most important, and mindfulness being the least in terms of their approach. It doesn't mean, to me, it's all important. So the other kind of thing that supports that, you may have heard of this, is biophilic design. As humans, or we can have a game if you want to have a game. Should we have a game? Let's have a game. Right, I want you all to close your eyes. Okay. Close your eyes, and your own ground designs. You've just created your perfect home. Think of it. Kevin McLeod arrives. It's all gone swimmingly beautiful. You know, your partner's not pregnant. It's online. It's to budget. Everything's working well. And Kevin arrives, and proudly you walk through your building. For the first time, you open the curtains of your living room and you look out. I want you to put your hands up if you see trees and fields and blue sky and natural landscapes. Right, open up. So we're it's called the Savannah effect, that we are historically predisposed to kind of connect to natural things. You know, whether it's kind of natural light, water, safety, all of those things, we're predisposed to that. So this is what biophilic design does, and it does it with a lot of research behind it. There's 30 years of research, especially in the medical field, that's kind of saying, you know, to be healthy doesn't mean you have to be expensive. You can be just appropriate. So in here we talk about materials, use of natural materials, use of natural planting. The planting actually reduces your air handling costs because it's filtering naturally, it's filtering the carbon, it's filtering the VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds that we use in adhesives and putting buildings together. It reduces all of that, but it filters them out. So it makes it safe. So the air quality is much better, and effectively it pays for itself over its life. Things like thinking in terms of design terms, task lighting, as opposed to general lighting. It's really easy for me to design a building with general lighting in it and say it's flexible because it's unified. But how engaging is that? You know, if you've got a library space and you've got task lighting, you're giving the individual the choice. You actually reduce your carbon content, you reduce your cost, because you've got a low level of background lighting and focus lighting where you need the task. The challenge is to make sure that we give you a plug and play, so as you move your stuff around, we enable. But it's all there, it's all sensible stuff. Mindfulness, some things. Introverts struggle to live in an extrovert world. Extroverts are comfortable in. So I think it's careful considerations about how you kind of create the stimulus in built environments. and make sure that you provide some havens for some of these people, because they're going to feel overwhelmed by some of the images that we constantly see. So I think we're just starting to understand the level of care and care. Think about, I've heard a lot about I'm open 24/7, and this is a kind of classic issue when it comes to wellness and how people perform. There's lots of good data that say that if you provide lighting systems that follow the circadian rhythms, i.e. the colour temperature, the tone of the white light changes from the morning to the evening, you actually produce natural and hormones, melatonin to sleep well, and cortisol to actually be very active. I think we can provide LED lighting systems that have that capability. They're no more expensive than any other system. So you can start to see how that language and sophistication starts to build up. This is the back end of the word. How we control natural light into the building is very important as well. We obviously place most of our activities around natural light, because that's obviously the best. You can kind of see the kind of circadian rhythm naturally happening. But glare is a big issue, especially with technology. So what we have to do is either create a pre-glare. You're looking for even lighting tone. So we actually use materials to reflect and refract the light back into the building, so you get more evenness rather than disparity between a low level of lighting and a high level of lighting. This is all free, I'm not going to charge for this. So sectionally in the word, we use, for example, a concrete structure to harvest the natural cooling that you get from concrete. It has a thermal mass. So we use environmentally friendly systems like air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, photovoltaics to actually, like a giant fridge, I'm switching from heating to cooling. I'm embedding water into the concrete and I'm cooling it day and night. So there's a constant even temperature in that building, and it's cost effective, low carbon. I then have displacement air, so I have a raised access computer floor, which means it gives everybody here the opportunity to build their environments as they go. It's very adaptive. I can place cellular rooms anywhere on top of that and still have power and data and air supplying all of the space. So as you change, the building can change with you. So I've not imposed what I imposed on Anne anymore. I'm going to give us something flexible. And it's just mixed. Humans, we live at a certain level, we mix the air in the right space. So it's at the right level of fresh air, and we extract it high level. All of the lighting in here is programmable from the central system. It can change with the circadian rhythms, as I mentioned. LEDs are fantastic, so it's low flicker as well. So epileptics and other people who suffer from conditions have less of an issue with this type of system. And then we've placed then a whole raft of acoustic material around the building as well. So again, that's very important. So active by design. So when you're considering that, here we placed our staircase, our big spiral staircase, right at the entrance. To actually promote people to be active and move. Some of the big, you hear it all the time, you know, some people are obese in society. So this is a way that active by design is thinking about considering where you have commonly used things. You place them on the ends of journeys. So you might have print zones, cafes, stairs. We're kind of promoting that movement within the building as a kind of healthy way of navigating up and through. I'm just going to finish with a few kind of landscape. This is just some of the content in the word. Flexible exhibition centre. I think the last one was, I drove something in 6 months, drove 100,000 visitors. So bearing in mind that the word, the original South Shields had 25,000 visits a year. We're at 500,000 now a year. So I think if you get it right, it works quite well. The other thing, think about cellular space, because cellular space can have its own environment. and its own character. Here, these are exhibition pods, but I can put it, the heating up to 30 degrees. I can change the lighting, I can push audio files through it, and all of a sudden I've got a story about glass that you feel as if you're in that space. I can do the same about conflict, and I can take it down to 0, and you can go in there and you can feel really uncomfortable. It's a story about conflict. I think the point here is cellular space allows you to do something that's different from the general environment that's created. And then again, I think we are fully enabled with both Wi-Fi, Cat6 distribution everywhere. It's all run through the floor, so you don't really see it. We also have, as I said before, we have little 3D digital labs, great space. Interestingly, I think from a public perspective, maybe it happens in academic, I don't know, but we had both on-council workers in this building, but we had some that worked for the schools team and some that worked for the libraries team, and the guys at the schools team were on the same terms and conditions. So they wouldn't work past 4 o'clock and they wouldn't work weekends. So I think if you're going to walk the walk, you have to believe in it and you have to sign up to it and deliver what the big ambition is. And it's the same, I guess, for you guys. That's been resolved, but it was quite an interesting educational position for me. In this library, we've got 2 main radio studios. So guys are writing their content, creating their own documentary, then sharing it within the building and out with the building. Because we then have, in here, we have 360-degree storytelling room, Skype lounges, little discrete audio seats that tell stories. Just delights, just little individual delights. Informative and useful than high tech, and it dates so quickly. That's the other challenge you will always get, And I think that's me done. Thanks very much.